Welcome, dear listener, to another episode of the Guitar Nerds podcast, season 5, episode something like 9. I'm your host, Joe Branton, joined this week by JD Short.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, JD. How are you? How are you feeling? You're a little raspy today.
Yeah, I'm a little raspy. I've had it's still fallout from the we didn't go to NAMM show, where it's just like I was trying to think. I was like, is this? Can I say we didn't go to NAMM-Thrax? That's too much of a name? But yeah, post-class. It's great talking to everyone, shouting over guitars for a couple days, but I'm still recovering. So yeah, great.
And we're a week on from that. That's it.
Yeah.
Dear listener, you'll remember last week, Matt and I did our rundown of the guitar show, the Birmingham Guitar Show, the biggest guitar show in the UK. This week, I'm catching up with JD Short about his experience at the guitar show. We're going to talk about all the cool brands that we saw, because of course I actually spent, me and JD spent the bulk of our time together. Matt was stuck on the Boss stand, so it was wonderful to hear all the stuff that Matt had checked out, but I think me and JD are going to be able to go into a bit more in depth with some of the brands we checked out. Also, of course, we also bought a lot of stuff, so we're both going to talk about the things that we inevitably purchased at the guitar show. JD, you always seem to end up coming away like at least £500 to £1,000 lighter every time I go to a guitar show with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes it's not that bad. This time wasn't that bad because I just got a Spectre not too long before this, so
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. I ended up getting the Thorpy Deboggen, like their all analog chorus, which is fantastic. I got the Great Eastern, the new crossover pedal they have, which is so incredibly cool and is everything I want. And
I'd like to talk about that like in depth a little bit later in the podcast. That pedal, dear listener, actually isn't out yet. It's not released yet, but I've spoken to David at Great Eastern, and he's happy for us to talk about it ahead of it being released. Because he was selling it at the show, and it was kind of a first look at the pedal, but it was definitely one of JD's, the thing that you were most excited about. The thing is, dear listener, when you're at a guitar show and you bump into people, as we're sort of constantly doing, so we know everyone in the industry, and the thing that everyone says at a guitar show is, "Oh, what have you seen? What's your favorite?" And of course, inevitably, we went, well, there's a fretless baritone with a built-in sustainer on the Fidelity booth. And the other thing that we were saying was
this crossover pedal, which, isn't normally a thing that would, set people a Twitter. But it's really fantastic in that basically what it does is it allows you to sort of split your low and high signal and then route different effects or your signal to different places. But it also means that when you can sweep and change that so that it keeps the volume consistent between the two. You've got there's a couple phase switches, which is important for some of that just to keep noise down. And then this pedal also has an overall clean blend to it as well, so that it really gives you so much flexibility around doing it. And it's all just in like a normal pedal format.
Yeah.
Which for me is, I've got one.
Oh, have you got one? Yeah, I think for people on the YouTube, let's.
For the YouTuber, I'll show it here. Let me get it out. I put it back in the box so it looked like I hadn't just spent all my time with it. But so that's what it looks like. It's just general pedal format, really simple control wise. But the fact that you've got, just being able to really. To put this on your board is huge for me because it's basically the pedal I've always wanted. Yeah. And when I've run crossovers in the past, I sort of have like desktop units that sit on or near my board or on top of my amp to sort of split the signal that way. But this lets you sort of do it where I could have post fuzz, post octave, anything like that, and then put the chorus or the crossover in the middle of all of that. Really is fantastic. Plus, for me, as bass or synth player, it really makes basically every other effect I own a bass effect, because it means that I can I have a clean blend, and more importantly for me, I have a crossover for everything.
I think
that I want.
that is the most important thing that's overlooked, because I imagine like a lot of listeners are going, well, how is that different from, you know, just a blend pedal? Because you can pick up a blend pedal for 50 quid, and this is obviously it's about 200 quid, this pedal.
Yeah.
It's being able to assign the EQ frequencies, the frequencies that you're passing to different effects is incredibly valuable. So it's not just about blending something in with your clean signal. It might be keeping the integrity of your low end whilst applying a rat distortion to your high end, you know, without having to lean on the clean blend. Also, you don't have to plug in two pedals. You can plug in one and then use the other just as like clean, unhindered low end or high end, which is also very useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, for the amount of all the vintage fuzzes that I really like.
Yeah.
One of the things that they always suffer from in a band setting for me is that they lose a lot of low end, which on guitar or something can be desirable because it makes it kind of poke out and it makes you kind of do different lines and stuff. But as a bass player, when I want like if I want a spitty top end, I oftentimes have to sacrifice low end or have to do something else to kind of make up for it. Where
totally,
it's basically go ahead.
No, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like it's just really great because it's sort of this one pedal allows me to sort of reevaluate all the other handful of pedals I own. You know, it's just a few, but like lets me sort of reevaluate and be like, oh, maybe this would work for this situation. Maybe this, you know, or like being able to bring in HM2s or something like that.
Exactly. It immediately makes me think of Proco Rats, of the Fredric Effects Super Unpleasant Companion.
Yeah.
Pedals that I like, fuzzes especially, obviously for bass players, that, you know, sound fantastic, but you can thick them out. But I don't think it's a bass specific issue. I actually think guitarists a lot of the time, you know, there are guitarists on the Facebook, on the Guitar Nerds group on Facebook who don't like fuzz, and complain about fuzz when people go on about fuzz. And I think the reason that people don't like fuzz is because whether you're a guitar or a bass, often, unless you're doing the right thing or in the right type of music or scenario, it does dip you out of the mix in quite an awkward way.
Yeah.
And actually having a crossover applied to a fuzz for guitar players is also valuable. It means you can keep the fullness of your signal, especially if you're the only guitar player, for example, in a band, and you still want to take up a decent wedge of the frequency range, but have that cool spitty fuzz. You don't have to sacrifice all your, all the rest of your tonal frequencies.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things I was kind of doing at the show was just running like delays on the high part of the crossover. So you're not so it's just sort of the twinkly bits kind of swirling around, or being able to do that with a shimmer or something, that so you don't get all the low end kind of buildup that you would get with reverbs or delays or things like that. And just being able to, from a utility perspective, I think it's really great. But from a creative perspective, it's also just expands possibilities so much. The other thing I always think about, so you think about fuzz, is like with like chorus on guitar, when you're playing distortion and like chords, it always gets real mushy. Where with this, with crossover, you can apply it only to sort of from, let's say, D string up kind of things. So you still get like general clarity retained, certainly with sort of thick, deep, bad choruses, you know, in a sense. And, you know, but also the overall clean blend, being able to just sort of bring in a bit of dry tone to have the definition still there, and it lets you do really warbly, really washed out choruses. So.
Absolutely. Exactly what I was going to say. I actually think modulation is kind of the area that I'm most excited about this pedal. Like a pedal that you have that is brilliant, that for some reason is constantly in my basket on Reverb, but I never quite click on, is the bright pink high band flanger that Boss made. Great for bassists because it applies flanger just to your high end and leaves your low end. Yeah, what a great looking, probably the best looking pedal Boss ever made. But
it's still got green back on it too. I haven't even done it.
Wow, that is cool. But it's such a great pedal, and it means, same with chorus, is the problem is, especially for bass players, or this again applies to guitarists who want a more full range sound, is sometimes modulation can really get a little bit soupy, especially if you're running with drives. If you have a driven amp, it can be a bit of a problem when you get all that weird swirl on your low end. That's not what you want, and it ends up creating strange EQ sort of smushiness. That was incredibly well described by me.
I mean, I think it is, because we all know what you mean. I think we're just like, oh yeah, it's the sponginess.
Yeah, there was more spronger on the Sperdouble.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think especially like, I think basses are affected more by it because it's lower frequencies, but most guitars would be the same thing, where it just sort of, it all kind of becomes like, like that soupy sort of, like treacly mess of just stuff, which is cool when you want it, but a lot of times you're like, I want something to make something pop.
Yeah.
But I don't want to sacrifice everything, and being able to sort of have that control is great, especially when you're running, like individual stomp box format. Like you can do a lot of this in, an HX stomp or something like that as well.
Sure, yeah.
But being able to do it with, individual pedals on a board, pedals, like or whatever your signal path is, because like I think we probably talked about it years ago now, but I used to run for my bass doubler stuff, like the solo bass stuff, 2 separate setups. And one was basically I was Eden stack and a Marshall for like my high end went to a Marshall, so I had like distortion and stuff, and I always use a crossover for that sort of stuff. And being able to sort of maybe work on that in a smaller format here is great, because it means recording wise, I could also do that whilst recording, like put my high signal through a small speaker and just have all that.
I just think if you really, really care about tone and you really want to build something very specific, this is a great pedal. One of the things I really wanted to do, I've got one of the prototype ones, which has a slightly different facial, and it doesn't have a clean blend on it. It was before he popped a clean blend on it, which was my suggestion.
Yeah, great idea.
No, I think loads of people suggested it, but I really liked applying delay to the low end and then a chorus to the high end, or a flanger to the high end, something modulation to the high end, and you got this like gorgeous just presence from the delay, because it removed any definition, so it was almost like atmosphere from the delay, and then the definition from the chorus on the high end it's just. And I kind of think it's just endless, isn't it? The amount of options that you've got with the crossover pedal.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And like at the show, we kept bumping into the other bass players wandering around looking for stuff. And it was just like, every time I had it, I was like, look at this. And they're like, yeah, that's great. Like universal reaction from bass players. Like guitar players are always a bit like, oh, interesting. And it's like, to do a bit more explanation of like, this is why it could be useful and important. And then it was like, oh, great. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
It's definitely one of those effects that's very much bread and butter for a bass player. I think we're very used to having to do this. Whereas with guitarists, it might be something new, but I don't think it's, like David Greaves, the guy who designs the pedals, who is Great Eastern, he is a guitar player, not a bass player. He designed this to make creating interesting tones easier, for guitar.
Yeah. I think it will be incredible for guitar, but I feel like it's just a real studio tool for me, because like I can see so many like synth applications, putting it through like 808s and stuff like that, and just being able to do loads of stuff as a creative tool, like as the thing that lets you do all the other stuff. It's really great, and I'm super stoked.
Yes, it is a wicked pedal. I think it's coming out at some point in April, dear listener. When it's officially released, I'll do some demo examples on the podcast of the sort of things you can do with it. I'm sure David won't have mind that we've spoken so much about this pedal. It's so good. There's obviously nothing you can check out at the moment, dear listener, but take our word for it. It's well good. And as soon as it's out there, we'll be all over it. Now, I do, just before we get too far into the podcast, I want to remind everyone, if you're in the UK and you can make it, you've got 2 more guitar shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. First of all, this weekend coming, if you're listening to this podcast when it's released, I have no idea what the date is today. It's the 12th, so I guess this podcast comes out on the 13th. So this weekend, the 13th of March, I should say. You can listen to this at any time. It's 2024. There you go.
Yeah.
The Stompbox exhibit, Stompbox Deli as it's sometimes known, which is the Synth Expo and Stompbox exhibit. That's happening in London this weekend. It's completely free. You do have to RSVP a slot because the venue ain't that big, and an awful lot of people have said that they're going. Its first year was last year. This is its second year because it's existed in the States but not here in the UK. It's fantastic. The whole gist is you bring your own guitar and it's just tables and tables of all the brands with their effects. I know Great Eastern are going to be there with the crossover, dear listener. So if you think about coming in, you can check that out. I know also KMA Machines are going to be there with their Endgame, which is extraordinarily good. Their stereo doubler pedal, cab sim and stereo doubler, which is excellent. I'm going to do some demos on that as well soon. So there's that. And then the week after that, we've got the Alternative Guitar Show, which I'm also going to be at, which is at the Fighting Cocks in London, the little Kingston, the legendary rock bar, the Fighting Cocks. And that's going to be on Saturday, the 23rd of March, the week after that, which is going to be great. Fredric Effects will be there, Fidelity Guitars, Tate Effects, Thorpy, a bunch of others. There are going to be loads of great brands and loads of great stuff there. So that's a cool, smaller show where you're actually going to get time and the ability to really deep dive on some stuff, which I'm really into. It's the first one. They want to do lots of alternative guitar shows in different places around the UK, and the idea is that they're smaller, more intimate, but you get a bit more out of them than you would a larger show. So do check that out. Alternative Guitar Show is their Instagram handle if you want to have a look at that. I hope to see loads of you there if you're in the UK, because I think what a great year for guitar shows so far.
Yeah, I mean, what a great month alone for guitarists. Like March being there, like, whew. Yeah. And with the Alternative Guitar Show, I think we spoke about this, but the idea behind that is that it's smaller, but it's like brands that are sort of purposely designed around like this, like alternative music or something, or is it
right?
Just
it's just like super luthier. So it's super like small brands. I mean, I guess Thorpy FX really isn't a very small brand, but still, I think basically it's British brands, isn't it? It's like the small grassroots British brands. Thorpy FX is just excelling into a new sort of realm of. They've sort of become the British JHS at the moment. A little bit, maybe. They probably don't sell as many pedals as Josh does, but they still make probably the best built pedals.
Well, all those new Thorpy interviews and stuff like that I keep seeing on socials, they're going to be as big as Hollywood JHS, even though I know they're in Kansas City. But
that's all Jackson Brooksby, dear listener. I know he's working with Thorpy FX now, and he's doing a wonderful job. I love Jackson; he's great. I only saw him for one day at the guitar show.
Yeah,
very briefly. But
he just could handle a 2-dayer.
No, he couldn't. Yeah. Oh well, but we're going to go through some of our favourite things now, dear listener. I do want to talk to you, JD, about that debogging in more depth, but I'll give you your voice box a little rest before we go into that. One of the things I wanted to, I'll deal with it early because it's been kind of a thing for me this week. At the show, I was given some strings and a lovely black anodized aluminium scratch plate by a friend of the podcast, Matt Parker, for my bass 6. He gave me a set of 24 to 110s Newtone strings. So super heavy gauge for a bass 6. But as I've always said on the podcast, the low E on a bass 6 is like it ships from Fender with an 86, and it's just not enough on a 30-inch scale. You need at least 100, I think. 95 is what Labella do on their flats, and you get better tension on flats, so that's okay. But 110 was what I wanted, but I was like, is it going to fit in the nut? Is it going to work? Guitar Nerds is sponsored by iZotope and Native Instruments, two companies who provide the bulk of the recording and editing tools used by guitar nerds. If you have a home studio or if you're thinking about getting into demo recording from home, then iZotope and Native Instruments provide the tools that you need to make premium quality recordings with ease and with virtually no equipment other than your guitar and laptop. iZotope make all the voice editing and audio repair tools that I use for the podcast each week, and Native Instruments Guitar Rig 7 is one of the best, most comprehensive collections of virtual effects and guitar amplifiers available anywhere. Use discount code NERDS10 on any product in the iZotope and Native Instruments catalogue for 10% off their fantastic range of tools. It did. I mean, I did have to do a little filing on the nut, but it was fine. The nut didn't break. So I got the new strings and the new plate and set it all up. And Matt Parker, who is a bass player who at the moment predominantly plays a bass 6 for bass, and he does a lot of session work and function work, and he uses the bass 6 as a bass. And he's noticed and then mentioned to me, and then I subsequently have noticed and can't unsee how much of a problem people have with him using a bass 6 as a bass. It's one of those weird things that seems to trigger people who don't play bass 6. People seem to get angry, and from both sides. You've got bass players being, that's not a bass. You've got guitarists being, that's not a bass. And it was interesting seeing the arguments that they would come up with, like trying to logically argue for something, when, funnily enough, I was like, oh, it's an interesting argument, and sort of went to look up on Fender's website, and Fender listed it under bass guitars, and literally start with the Fender Bass 6 was initially released as a bass guitar for part of it. Like, it is the company making it, calling it a bass. So whatever you think, there is no argument. But anyway, the arguments made by guitarists were interesting. They were saying, well, it's a baritone guitar because it has 6 strings and it's only a few inches longer than a baritone. And then the bass argument, I saw some stupid points being made. Someone was saying, oh, it's to do with string spacing, which is like, give up. Music's not for you. It's not for you. But there were some interesting arguments from bass players, most of them stupid. The guitarists were at least saying, I will admit, people play bass 6 as a baritone guitar very commonly. And some of the arguments that the guitarists were making was like, look, I see them all the time because I play in heavy, like doom music, and people use them as baritone guitars. And I accept and concede that is how people are using them a lot today. Fender released it as a bass 6. One of the first and probably the most famous, biggest bass 6 player of all time is Jack Bruce. Jack Bruce is a bass player. Whoops.
Oh no!
Jack Bruce,
oh no!
I've done it. Jack Bruce is a bass player and played it as a bass on Cream recordings. Probably the first time the bass 6 is heard in modern music is as a bass. It is a bass anyway. So,
also, what's the name of it?
yeah, the bass 6. But I concede that it's a good all-rounder. I just don't concede that it's not a bass. I agree that it can do the other things, but it is a bass that can do the other things.
I just don't know why it matters.
I know.
I know. But it's meant like, I don't care if it's a bass or guitar.
Yeah,
I have basses and I have guitars, and
yeah.
There are. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine. Like, I thought it's funny because like Matt Parker was putting up videos where he's playing famous bass lines using the bass 6, and then people are being like, it's not a bass. It's like, you are literally watching a video where it sounds like a bass and it is a bass. But anyway, that aside, I thought it was great. And so this week I wanted to record a sound sample just to show off how versatile it is as everything, not just showcasing it as a bass. It actually was great for some chord stuff and for some sort of light, like baritone style lead work as well. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful instrument. I really want to kind of expand on it and do more with it. Obviously, I've got the Grez Bass 6 on the way, so I'm going to be doing more with that. But I'll play this week's sound sample and then we'll talk a little bit about that. There you go. The basics, doing all the things. What a wonderful, versatile instrument.
I mean, it sounds great, certainly in that sample. And it just made me think, too, you know, like we talk so much about short scale basses and how they're good for guitarists wanting to like have a bass around to be able to do this. And you just sort of feel like bass 6 might be the answer for loads of people.
Yeah.
You know, like it certainly is, as there are affordable ones coming in and around, like decent good ones and stuff. Like it's such a versatile instrument that you can make do whatever you really want it to, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. I posted like a little video of me just playing a bass line on it and I popped it on the Guitar Nerds group on Facebook, and I saw that someone had commented being like, I can't get mine set up properly. And I will concede that they are really tricky to get set up properly. Yeah. I think if you buy a bass 6, out of the box, it's not going to be great, and I think that can be off-putting for a lot of people, and they move them on quickly because of it. In fact, I've got to pick one up tomorrow. Matt Parker bought one, but it's from someone that lives right next to me, so I'm going to go and pick that up, and I think he got it for very little money. So I think people just give up on the instrument, especially when Fender shipped them out with that 80-something, 86, 84 low E.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the thing of just having silly small strings on them that makes it feel a bit but yeah, like I think you're saying, like when you put proper thick gauge strings on, decent setup, they're really great instruments.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, dear listener, we did want to talk about some of the companies that we'd been checking out. I guess before we move on to those, let's talk about your depogging, because of course I bought the Camouflage recently and have absolutely loved it. As a flanger, it also does the chorus thing really well. I find the blend control very useful for making subtle tones, but it also does extreme stuff, borderline phaser vibrato-esque stuff if you push it as well. So it's such a versatile tool. But I was kind of feeling like maybe I should have got the depogging.
I feel a bit guilty talking about how good the vibrato on the depogging is, because it's very good and it's very you. I would imagine it is. You know, I've played with it now for about a week or so, and it's easily my favorite chorus pedal of the moment for sure. Like I think what I think is important is it's all analog, which is what I always love. I love a bucket brigade. It's always like I think what it does really well is the subtle chorus,
right?
Which is where a lot of chorus pedals for me fall down. Like a lot of them sound good if they're big and washy and kind of intentionally too dense. But then when you try to back it down to like what you would actually use or where I want to use it, they're all just a bit flat, or that you can never dial back how thick the chorus is. Even if you turn the depth and stuff way down, it's always clearly an effect, where this can just get that little bit of bloom if you really want it. But it also does really rich chorus well, and the vibrato is like you really feel it, like, so, which is great because I've kind of wanted. I've not found in my like with my own stuff like a good use for vibrato,
Oh, right.
and you always talk about it. And I'm like, I've got to be missing something,
Yeah.
and so I always think about getting one, and just haven't yet. But this being able to sort of do that lets me sort of set it up as a vibrato, play around with some stuff, put it through different courses and everything. I haven't tried it with the crossover yet, to be fair, but I haven't really needed to because the low end still feels real to me,
Right.
which I think is the thing with like a lot of digital cores, especially, is that the low end just gets too undefined and too sort of all over the place, which then makes everything else sound out of tune.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely feel that. I think, yeah, we spoke about a bit before we were recording, but I love the Dimension chorus, from Boss. But the fact that it has no rotary controls, it's just switches, sounds great on its own. But as soon as you start stacking it with other things, especially anything with a gain stage in it, as your amplifier is going to have at the end, and I have a preamp at the end of my gain stage, at the end of my pedal board, it just ends up getting everything a bit mushy, and having the control, being able to keep the depog in a little bit more subtle is a great feature.
Yeah, plus I mean it's got a blend on it as well, so if you're really doing again that sort of warble effect chorus,
Uh-huh.
I found if you dial it back less than 12 o'clock and just have a bit more clean, like you can really sort of create a pad underneath your line in a sense, and then also with the bass treble controls, which only affect the chorus side of the signal, then you can really change that, so you almost get a total different, a totally different like feel with the same pedal for the same sort of thing you're playing. So it's I can't say enough good things about it. I also got serial number 666, which is, makes me giggle.
You forgot
So,
about
yeah,
that. Wow.
which doesn't really feel like, chorus pedal needs to be 666. If it was like a Goliath, 14 distortions in one, maybe, but
Yeah, exactly. Well, still an extremely cool pedal. Should we talk about? No. I tell you what. Let's continue with the effects pedal thing. Another company that we checked out was Fredric Effects. Fredric Effects are a brand that both JD and I have consistently purchased things from at guitar shows. I love everything that they do. They're everything about Fredric Effects is they're London based, UK based, but inspired by that sort of East German era utilitarian pedals and sounds and tones. And so it's lots of fuzz stuff. He makes a great harmonic and utility percolator. A lot of his stuff is fuzz style. The bulk of his pedal range is fuzzes. He does make a clon sort of thing as well, but the bulk of what he does are fuzzes or preamps, and they're all excellent. I think we both own Super Unpleasant Companions. Is that right?
Yeah.
But you own the big box and I own the small box, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you have top-mounted controls on yours? Because he does them.
I do.
Dear listener, he does them in wedge shapes. Oh, even the small ones are in little wedges. Oh, the big ones are in big, proper vintage style wedges.
The little wedges are just great. Yeah. So I've got this one in white. So,
yeah. Very, very cool indeed. Yeah, I think that one of the little ones that we loved the most was the Regent 150 preamp, dear listener.
I really want that. That's just, and
it's
like
not a bass pedal.
That was things we're chatting to him. I was like, is there any way that would work? He's like, no, the frequencies are totally wrong. But I was like, maybe, and it's like, oh yeah, no, it really shines on guitar, right. And then you'd be like, make it work for bass. But I think for me, like the thing, like you were saying about like everything being sort of like East Germany, like that sort of era of things was just, it all feels like the kind of stuff you'd find in a garage, like,
Yeah.
like 20 years ago, which for me is all the stuff around Trainer or like old PV or, like those sort of like transistory amps is the kind of stuff that I would imagine are like old Radio Shack things, like realistic. And you just be like, oh, these are great. Everyone used these. And, you could get them for next to nothing. And now everything is, everything is like $4,000 for a Trainer amp. And you're like, what?
Everyone remembers their childhood and how good it actually was. Yeah.
Or just be like, oh, it's like an amp you hated.
Guitar Nerds is sponsored by Stringjoy Guitar Strings, the world's first true guitar string custom shop. The thing that I love most about Stringjoy is just their attention to detail, their dedication to making their strings the best in the world. And that's a labour-intensive task that they don't shy away from. Stringjoy are also innovative. They're always looking for new ways to make strings better. As guitar players, we've become so used to all the shortfalls of commercially available strings that we stopped even looking for them to be better, last longer, intonate well, easily. Stringjoy bring all of that to every pack of strings they make, and they're available almost as readily as any other generically made guitar string. Stringjoy strings are available at stringjoy.com and at 400 plus dealers across the globe. If your local store doesn't stock Stringjoy yet, ask them to.
Like for me, like PV's that for me is like because where I grew up at the time, there were no other brands really available. Like it was just PV. And then, so every cover band you saw had PV. Everything was just, and the big gray side PV and everything. And I was like, oh, I can't be bothered with it. And then now, every time I see like an old PV, I'm like, oh, maybe I should get one of those. You know what I want?
Vintage.
A cabinet's got an 18 and 2 10s in it. That's what I want. That makes sense.
That's it. That was the weird times of mix mashing cones and cabs and making them super heavy because no one cared. No one cared about weight.
Well, but back to Fredric, like it just feels like you get a chance to like discover stuff that I never knew existed.
Oh yeah,
things,
sure. Well, on that little on the Regent 150 preamp that we were talking about, dear listener, which you have to check out. The looks of this pedal are so quintessentially 80s. 80s hi-fi sort of thing.
It takes everything I have not to have it, just to like not to just buy it to look at it and go, oh, this is what electronics used to look like.
Yeah. So it's based on the looks and tonally, obviously, the preamplifier and EQ circuit from the Vermona Regent 150K amplifier of the 70s, which was a staple of Eastern Bloc rehearsal studios and bedrooms. When first prototyping the circuit, he expected it to be like a lo-fi, punky, scrapey. However, the results far surpassed his expectations. Treble control adds clean sound with glass and precision, and the boosted bass is warm without being flubby. He was also saying this is actually one of his most popular effects, and he thought it was so niche, this Eastern Bloc rehearsal transistor amp preamplifier, but it sounds great in all the videos he's done. It's very cool. It uses a charge pump to match the voltage of the original amplifier, and a real new old stock 40-year-old East German transistors. It's extraordinarily cool. And if you go onto the website, dear listener, he's got a picture of the Vermona amplifier next to it, which might be the coolest looking. I
haven't seen the actual original amp.
Oh, it's quite something. It's quite something. You'll love it. But it's literally, dear listener, it's an amplifier with two inputs, and then it just it just has volume, bass, and treble for each of the two inputs. But everything about it is
what more do you need?
Yeah,
this is when everything peaked. God. Oh, look at this. Oh,
yeah,
it's very good.
It's so good. Oh, I might have to get one. But I did buy 2 pedals from him and got a T-shirt as well, because he does a cool Sonic Youth T-shirt, but with Fredric Effects words instead of the Sonic Youth thing, which is very cool. But I bought two things mainly because I couldn't decide. I actually messaged him beforehand. I was like, I was like, Tim, I'm going to come and buy a Dresden synth fuzz. I need. You're going to bring one. And then when I got there, he also happened to mention the Bug Crusher sounded great for bass. I ended up trying that out, and I couldn't pick. He offered me a deal on both, and boom, Bob's your uncle. I ended up with both.
And a t-shirt.
And a t-shirt, yes. Yeah. But I did pick up the Dresden Synth Fuzz, which is very interesting, dear listener. Well worth checking out. Great for guitarists, but it's not a bass pedal. It just happens to sound great on bass. So it's really a guitar pedal primarily. And it's the Dresden Synth Fuzz it combines two synth-sounding octave fuzzes running in parallel, an upper and a lower octave fuzz. And you can select to have them both running, or you can choose just the lower, just the upper. It has a clean blend. There you go, dear listener. That's why it's good for bass. And then it has just a volume for the effect and an input gain control, which is very, very useful. And yeah, so the volume control is literally just the volume of the effect, which is kind of interesting. You can't choose any of the, your input gain would drive how affected it is, but that's sort of about it. It sort of is how it sounds. And then you're just blending in the clean alongside of it. But other than looking very cool in a wedge shape with a big chicken head knob in the middle and a couple of other smaller controls around it, it's a fantastic sounding synth fuzz. Reminds me of the Keeley Synth 1, but a bit more versatile and a little bit fuller range, thanks to the lower octave and the clean blend. And just a brilliant pedal. It went straight onto my pedal board, and it's now my big bit pedal. And it does a great job of it as well. And the other pedal that I picked up was the Bug Crusher. Actually, JD, did you get a chance on either the Dresden Synth Fuzz or the Bug Crusher?
Yeah, I played both of them quite a bit because it was also in that like deciding time of like which one, and like I think both of these are really great. They're not miles apart as far as like I think the sound I would use them for.
Right.
But I think I mean, I'm glad you got both because both is the answer, really. Yes, I sort of feel like I would probably go with the Bug Crusher. That was the one I was closest to because it was, it sort of did like a ring moddy sort of fuzzy sound.
Yeah, it's an analog sample rate reducer, dear listener. Yeah. So it just has a clean blend and then the rate. So as you turn it clockwise. As you turn it clockwise, it's reducing the rate. So that messes with the pitch. So it ends up giving the illusion of like a higher pitched fuzz sort of thing alongside it. And then as you counterclockwise will give you a sort of a lower, thicker, fuller sound, a more, I guess, 8-bit sort of snazzy sort of sound in the lower register. But then the clean blend allows you to sort of keep some integrity to your sound. So this went straight onto my board as well, and I found where I was using it was in place of modulation. So maybe it's sort of a mellower bit where I'm playing a bit of a melody line, and I can use that to just give something a bit interesting. Something, that's where I would use a flanger, a chorus, a vibrato. Like, oh, I've got this sort of exposed melody part here that needs something to just lift it. I'll slap on a modulation pedal. This was a really interesting, different way of doing that, of just adding something else without losing anything. Because of that clean blend, I'm retaining all of the tone that I want, and then just having that cool, weird ring mod thing alongside it.
Yeah, the thing that surprised me about it is it sounded different than I expected. Because when you hear like bit reducer, I always sort of think of like, mostly this is like electronic music for me as well, but like thinking about things that sound a bit more, Atari, Nintendo, like old Nintendo-y kind of thing. And like this pedal doesn't make things sound glitchy and like digitally to me, which is, I know digitally is a word, but it sounded weird there. But it just sounded rich and interesting, like you were saying, as opposed to it sounding like I wouldn't use it if I was trying to make something sound like a computer dying.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Yeah, sure, exactly. It was. I thought one of the interesting things was how the clean blend was incredibly full range. Like there was a lot of clean blend. I think of like the KMA Chief Disruptor, one of my favorite sort of big muff style pedals. That's got a clean blend on it, but the clean blend is subtle. You know, it's, if you've got it on 3/4, you're still probably only just hearing your clean note attack at that point. Whereas to turn the clean blend to 3/4 on the Fredric Effects pedal would be to overpower the signal with clean blend. It was a very different sort of thing. I had to use it much more subtly than I expected, but a little bit tweaking, and it was an excellent pedal. Actually, because the clean range is so full, it works really well with drives, like just having a drive and then running it after the drive. So it's letting most of the drive signal through, and then adding that little fizzy bit crush thing to the high end was excellent. Very tasteful.
Yeah, I'm stoked you got both.
Yes, yeah, me too. They're a great company. I love everything Fredric Effects do. What wicked company. Now, let's talk about a guitar brand before we move on to someone else, another effects brand that you checked out at the show. I want to talk about House 95 guitars.
Oh yeah.
This, dear listener, I couldn't believe this. I checked this out. You know, I was going through the exhibitors list before we went to the show, and I was like, oh, you know, looking for people I don't know, so maybe I can message them and be like, oh hi, you know, I'm at the show with the guitar nerds, and I came across this House 95 guitars, and I clicked on over to their website, house95guitars.shop, and I was like, hold on. This company only do the guitars that Tom DeLonge played. And that is, I was like, I'm missing something here, obviously. But no, that is it, dear listener. So sorry, turn off if you're not interested in this. Actually, don't. Just listen through this. It's still interesting. But yeah, this company, House 95 Guitars, they make copies of every guitar that Tom DeLonge played. Now, I don't just mean that, you know, the famous Stratocaster with the Invader pickup in the bridge and the pearloid plate. I mean from the very beginning. So Tom DeLonge's first guitar was just it was an ordinary Stratocaster, a white Strat that he'd covered in stickers, and it's similar to the Billy Joe Armstrong Stratocaster, where he'd removed the bridge single coil and butchered in a humbucker, but obviously still at the angle. Tom had done the same thing, so it was like a sticker covered white Strat with a humbucker at an angle in the bridge. So he does a copy of that, complete with a full sticker pack. Then he, of course, does the punker Strat, as he calls it, where he even makes a copy of the Invader. So everything is a copy. There's no sort of official thing. So he does. It's not a Seymour Duncan Invader. It's his own version of an Invader. But he does that Strat with the pearloid plate in the surf colours. And the Invader pickup in the bridge. He then continues Tom's career over onto. Well, I actually don't think he does the Epiphone ES333. Because obviously it's not a bolt-on, much more difficult to do, but he does then pick back up with the Starcaster, which Tom DeLonge has moved to now that he's left Gibson and come back to Fender. So of course, very famously, when Fender were like, we're going to do a Tom DeLonge signature, and they released the Strat. And of course, I went to see Blink-182, dear listener, and I can tell you, Tom DeLonge did not play the guitar that is currently out with his name on it at any point. He played his custom-made Starcasters that they're building for him that they don't have out for general sale. So, House 95 Guitars make a copy of a Starcaster with a humbucker in the bridge. They do it in several colours. It, of course, has that 70s Strat headstock and neck profile. It's even down to the fact that it's a 12-inch radius. Tom moved to a 12-inch radius after he came back from Gibson. He kept the radius from the Gibson guitars. Single volume control. And again, House 95 guitars even do sticker packs so that you can do, because all of Tom's guitars now have he either has one covered in old punk stickers like Fugazi Descendants, or he has ones with, various Blink logos on them. So you can also get those. And he's currently working on a couple of the Mark Hoppus basses as well. The jazz bass with the P pickup and the newer Jaguar bass as well. What a ridiculously specific thing to do.
I just want to say it's probably the most childlike I've seen you at a guitar show in a while, where it was just like, oh, what's showing everything? Yeah, it's just like, and it was surprising. It's very rare that I feel out of my depth when people are talking about like guitar stuff at a guitar show, and I was just like, yeah, I don't know about this, but it was like finding yourself at like a Star Trek convention or something like that. And just someone's like, well, the Gorgons in episode 5 of blah, 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 and you're like, he didn't have a left toe because he lost it in the war. That's why they have the limp. And then all the other Gorgons had to do this. And I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. It's cool pink. But it is I mean, fair dues. I just can't imagine the fact that we were talking about how like, surely this can't be the business model, right? That it's just, and it was like, oh yeah, no, it is, but it's really in depth, and there's a lot more to it than you think.
I can't believe there are that, but I was like, yeah, I guess it's fine. Yeah, like most people who like Blink-182 are probably hitting 40 around now. Like everyone's got expendable cash. Why not get the thing that Fender should be making that aren't? I mean, also that's the other thing. I think his guitars were $699.
Yeah.
Which was just alarmingly cheap. I think he's having them made in either China or Indonesia. I can't remember where he said. So he is just having it. It's like an OEM thing. And then just with his logo on the headstock. But the fact is, he's obviously done the shape ever so slightly differently to remove any legal restrictions from Fender. But Fender should be making it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like it looked great, and like you said, like a lot of people turning 40, maybe don't have the cash for a Corvette, but have a cash for a Starcaster, like great. Or it's really just about getting the thing you've wanted your entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I don't have a house big enough for the G.I. Joe USS flag. If anyone has one and wants to have a play date, let me know.
Yeah. I guess that's about what it was.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, we've got about time for one more thing. Dear listener, we're going to head over onto the Patreon episode afterwards. We're going to continue this. JD's got a bunch more pedal things to talk about. We have a couple more guitar brands and other things to discuss as well. But before we go, let's talk about one more thing from your list. Should we talk about Ritual?
Yeah. I mean, Ritual devices. Always, we see them around. We played several of their pedals, everything. They're always great. Couple I really stood out to me this time was I really enjoyed playing the Rainmaker, which is that's the vibrato they have. It's just sounded really good. Had a nice, normal stuff you would imagine, depth level, but the tilt function just gave it a bit of vibe, sounded really good.
Really useful. I found using the texture control, you can also get things to be quite tremolo-esque as well, which is just very versatile. I thought just great controls for a vibrato tremolo. Level, tilt, texture, frequency, and depth. And so just really easy to get something, or just really good for getting something interesting, something different out of.
Yeah, and could be really subtle, but could also go pretty over the top sometimes. But yeah, like that the texture is sort of is like a dry blend sort of thing in it as well. So it gives you your normal signal, and then the vibrato tremolo sort of beating against it was it was really good. And then what was the other, like that big fuzz?
The
that we had at
Grimmel King.
Yeah. Grimalkin.
Grimalkin.
I don't. Yeah.
No, who knows?
Which is just sort of a op-ampy, transistory, octave, multi-fuzz.
Yeah.
Could get really gross, but seemed great. And to be fair, also the one they had there had it's just a bunch of. I've lost a bit of my mythical creature sort of knowledge, but I'm guessing this is what it is, but it looks like just a bunch of cats on the pedal. And so I was like, oh, this is great. It's this pedal covered in cats. But it was, it's really big pedal that I'd hindsight wish I would have. I wish I had one right now, especially with the Great Eastern crossover, where I feel like, I could easily make this work regardless. But it was sort of that thing where saying it's such a lovely bloke too, and we always talk about, like there's probably some things coming that are well up my street. So
yes, we've spoken to him the last little while about the last year about a couple of things he's working on. We're very excited about those, and Guitar Nerds will be getting fully involved in his new releases, hopefully for later this year.
I just think, I mean, really getting a chance to play through all the pedals that were there, like they're all good, and I really like the look of them. A lot of them are like acid etched, and it's just steel and black sort of stuff. And you're like, this is a good tough look.
Yeah,
like
I really like them.
heads.
They're simple, they're functional, like they're just proper pedals. There's something that reminds me of like the early days of boutique pedal companies about this. There's something quite sort of doomy and sludgy. I feel like when, certainly in the UK, when we started seeing boutique pedal brands, it tended to be really utilitarian, robust, functional things. And it tended to be stuff for, I don't know, like grunge and doom and bands wanting to make an awful lot of noise. That's where all the pedals were sort of coming out. And now every boutique company has, a deal with an artist who's painted some gorgeous graphic on the front. I'm not saying that that's bad. It's lovely that that's the way it's gone, but there was something just a bit more functional, a bit more, I don't know. It just reminded me of the origins of boutique pedals. They are very, very good.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because like one of the things I experience here is that there's so much stuff here that is just basically BBC offcuts. Like you'll just get like random boxes of stuff that are like, oh, well, this is a 4-signal combiner that then does this, that, and it's like, we needed 1,000 of them, so we just built them, and there's like all that stuff around that you just don't, or just I never saw in the States. Like there isn't the same sort of structure there, and it's just it's just great to be able to get all these old professional tools, kind of stuff. But it kind of gives me that vibe where it's just like, it's just a metal box with some writing on it, isn't it? And it's like that's all it needs to be. And you're like,
it's very cool indeed. Well, yes, Ritual Devices, they make great pedals, and we love them very much. Yeah. We've come to that point in the podcast, dear listener, where I'm going to tell you all about our top 10 tier Patreon supporters. JD and I are going to head over and record the Patreon episode, patreon.com/Guitar Nerds. You can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $1 a month. You get the podcast ad-free at $1 a month. If you spend $5, you get the bonus episode. At $10, you get the bonus episode plus my love. Plus, I'm going to thank you all personally at the end of this podcast. So thank you very much to Stefan Carlson, to Nicholas Strom, Rocket Rob Patterson, Phil Sadler, Marcus Deluxe, Suresh, Dorsonic Pickups, Rob Witherden, Anton Fryant, Barry Gresbick, Steve Davis, John Conaway, Yogi the guitarist, Ty Allen, Kyle Harris, Sean Hughes, Andy Hoffler, Eric Hemmer, Jeffrey Wax, Dan Pilver, Brian Einsler, Dylan Griffiths, Mark Hizal Kadawaki, Eric File, Peter Pesce, Chris Franklin, Andy Manley, Joe Puttick, Blake Wyland, Phil Radomski, Dave Lee, Ross Edwards, Jason Wharton, James Dorr, Jake Gray, Derek Rich, Scott Kennedy, Steve Merkel, Abe Matthews, Christopher Losef, Stephen Burke, Robin Smith, Kaitopia the Band, Andy McKenzie, Brad Page, Rob Nordvik, Scott O'Brien, and of course, Moog Gravit. Thank you very much, one and all. You're lovely. Now, we're going to go record the Patreon episode. We're going to be talking about more things that we checked out at the guitar show. I want to hear what JD thought about the Buzzing Bugs pedal. We talked about that last week and we demoed it on last week, but we're going to talk about that. We might talk about a couple of the other things. Reverend basses, that's going to be a thing that we're going to discuss. Maybe the new Ancoats. Join us there. Join us over on Patreon and we'll be back next week with more of this guitar nerdery. Farewell.
Goodbye.